Welcome to Career Tools. This week, going back to work on site after the pandemic. The questions this cast answers are, what can I expect going back to work on site after the pandemic? And what should I think about before going back to work on site after the pandemic?
Folks, if you're not a licensee, we always encourage you to become one. It's only $200 a year. And next week, we're rolling out a permanent change to our license, adding significant value. Many of you probably already have the interviewing series. Well, now we're folding the interviewing series into the license. You can still buy it separately if you want for $150, but why would you when for another $50 you could get the interviewing series along with the license? You'll also get First Job Fundamentals. You get the resume workbook. You get the interview creation tool for the time of your license. And in addition, next week on the 30th of June, we launch Executive Tools, a bi-weekly podcast for those of you who are thinking about making the transition ultimately and someday in your career to being an executive. And as I've been saying recently, do you think when they promote you to executive, they'll start teaching you how to be an executive? I don't think so. So come to the website, get a license. If you buy before next week, the changes, the improvements in the license value will happen automatically. You won't need to do a thing about it. Hope to talk to you as a licensee, because licensees actually get to write me mails and I respond every day. An awful lot, as a matter of fact.
This is a rare, timely cast. If you know anything about Manager Tools and Career Tools, we attempt to make all of our casts timeless, meaning it doesn't matter if you listen to a cast from last week or a cast from 15 years ago when we started. They're all still relevant. We stand by the advice. We don't change our advice. We don't change our guidance based on fashion or different millennials, all that stuff. But 2020 was 2020. And so this is a rare cast where we're addressing something specific that's timely. But I think it has enough to think about. So if you're listening to this in 10 years' time, I think it will still be useful to some extent. Mm-hmm. And as everybody knows, the unexpected experiment of 2020 was how many people can work from home successfully. But the experiment of 2021 is entirely predictable, which is, how do we go back to work on site? Do we go back to work on site? And what should that look like? We know that we are going to have to run through that experiment and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And so because we know we're going to have to do it, we can predict some things, or we can think about some things ahead of time to do it successfully. Some people will never go back to working in an office. Some people will go back part-time. Some people it might be part-time per week. It might be occasional days in the office. It might be 4 days a week in the office and an occasional day at home. All of 2020 taught us that there is a bigger range of successful ways to work than we ever thought there were.
Absolutely.
And so the range of what is normal, or the range of possibilities for the way people work, is forever expanded.
Absolutely.
And because we know that some people will go back to work part-time or full-time on site, we wanted to give you some guidance about what to expect and what to think about ahead of that.
Absolutely. Our cast today is going to start by covering making mention of health and hygiene. And then we're going to discuss expectations of conflict, expecting more meetings, treating it like your first job, and waiting a year.
And the health and hygiene bit is easy.
Yeah, it's
We're not
easy.
Qualified.
We're not. We're not doctors.
We're not doctors. We're not qualified to give you any guidance on anything that comes under the heading of health and hygiene. How far should you sit from your seatmate if you've been vaccinated? Don't know. Ask the CDC or whoever is running that in your country. Yes, you should know what the guidance is, but we're not going to tell you what that is because it's not something we know. So what we do know is that you can expect more conflict when you go back to the office.
Absolutely. Now, guys, conflict happens in every organization at every level, every single day. Conflict itself is not abnormal, and we should not expect any team to work without conflict. That said, the level of conflict may increase significantly, potentially, when we go back to the office. And the solution to that is communication.
And you and I are high Ds, and now we're like, oh, gosh.
Terrible, right?
Yeah.
I know. exactly.
If you think about it, the change in schedule and environment, even for the people that were desperate to go back to the office, is disrupting.
Oh, extreme.
Right? There's some team members who've managed to avoid conflict with one another by having less contact. And now they're going to be sitting next to each other again.
Right. Absolutely. Guys, work processes will have changed. And while some people will want to change back, others are going to be pretty happy accepting the current changes that are in place. Personal priorities may have changed. Company priorities may have changed. Usually, one member of the team has a mental, physical, emotional, financial issue that's affecting their work time. When you go back to the office, potentially every member of your team will have at least one stressor that is affecting them when you return. At least one of the people you work with is going to be struggling. And the job of the rest of the team is to provide that support system. With everyone struggling, the support system that the team provides will be weak. And it's very easy to expect that everyone's going to be working at only about an 80 to 90% effective rate for the first couple of months while we figure this out. So the team needs to communicate.
And the year to 18 months that we've spent working from home is a long time in terms of work. If you think about it, most people change jobs every 2 to 4 years. That's half of the time that you'll have been in a job on average. You've spent in this weird situation that, everybody started calling new normal, and then we stopped using the word normal at all because nothing was ever normal. It's long enough for a lot of people to have changed jobs, either because they wanted to or because they lost their job and had to find a new one. It's long enough for lots of people to have changed responsibilities. There's been changed family circumstances. I know like 4 people who've had babies.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was a pandemic thing. I think it just happened that those people were ready. And it just seems like, I guess because I kept thinking, gosh, it must be awful to be having a baby in hospital when nobody can be with you and all that stuff, right? I guess it happened in my mind. But, human beings carry on being human beings, whatever the circumstances. But babies are born in war, and they're born in famine, and they're born during pandemics. People carry on being people. And so everybody's circumstances have moved 18 months from where they were when we started. Even though you might think that it feels like the world has stood still for 18 months, it hasn't. And so all of that stuff needs to be renegotiated. All of that stuff is going to be different when you go back in the office. And some of us have settled into some really comfortable ruts working at home. For some of us, we adapted really quickly within 6 or 8 weeks. And we've had like a year of, I really like working from home. I like doing it, I like going for a walk in the afternoon. And going back to work in an office just resets all of that. And the smooth running, the cohesive team is going to be disrupted no matter what. That's the one thing you can know.
Right? I mean, I know that you did mention briefly, Wendy, that many people have changed jobs, but as you guys know, we do virtual conferences, Effective Manager, Effective Communicator. It astounds me how many people in their introductions will introduce themselves by saying they've never met their coworkers. They started during the pandemic. They started a job that was 100% virtual. So there isn't even that past relationship, those past connections to remember back to, right? There's not a rut to fall back into. There isn't a rut at all yet.
Yeah. So if you have a team of 10 and you have two new members, when you go back to the office, 2 of those people have never met the other 8.
Right.
That's a whole bunch of new relationships.
Yeah.
That have to be obviously they have a relationship and that they're working together now, but it's different when you work together, sat next to each other or sat in the same building.
Absolutely. Now, guys, the Tuckman model of team development says the teams go through 5 stages. The stages are forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. Forming is the bringing the team together stage, right? That creation process. Storming is the conflict phase. And this is where the team establishes that unofficial structure. The team norms and establishes the purpose of their team. Right? You'd think that these were put together by the company when it creates the team, but that's not really the case, right? We make those individual connections within. And once the team's normalized, it's better able to perform as a group and as a unit. Now, because of the disruption, because of the pandemic, because of the new addition of all of these team members, because of all of the things that this has brought upon us, every team, regardless of how cohesive and at what stage it may have been, it could have worked together for 10 years before pandemic. All of the teams are going to have to bounce back to that storming stage where differences of feelings and opinions and competition lead to high emotions, lead to conflict. All of the norms that your team has previously established will need to be renegotiated and re-established.
And not in a, we sit in a meeting and our manager tells us this is how we work.
Right.
Not that kind of norm, but the norm of the back chat and who talks to who.
Who goes to
and,
coffee with whom.
You know,
and
yeah, exactly. When we go to lunch, it's all the informal stuff. Like the formal stuff of like, you put this status on the system when you do X, that's easy. Yeah. It's all the personal contact. It's all the personal relationships that has to be renegotiated. And the only way to get past this stage is to communicate. Now, instinct is to separate when we're in conflict, especially at work when we know we can't punch people. Punching people is very forbidden. So when somebody's winding you up, or you're angry, or there's something doesn't seem right, or somebody's getting loud in a meeting and you don't think they should be, the instinct is to leave the room or to leave that situation, to get away from it. Yeah, disengage and to go back to your own corner. But that doesn't help. The only way to do it, if you need to negotiate, you have to be in the room together talking. And maybe there is a good reason for separating in the moment, right? If it really is getting heated, then yes, it's a good thing to, for you to be apart for half an hour or 20 minutes or however long it takes to bring the adrenaline down. But then you have to communicate.
Exactly.
The norming stage is all about finding a common sense of purpose and direction. It's like the team agreeing, this is how we work together. And you can't do that without talking to someone. You can't do that without finding out what they want and what you want and how that fits together. And the aim should not be to have your manager adjudicate.
Yeah.
Like this isn't a I'll tell mum situation. This is, you're two adults, you're at work. You can work it out. The aim is for you two, or three, or however many people you're in conflict with, the aim is for you to work it out together so that you can continue to work together.
Absolutely.
And we do have casts about conflict, which if you go to the website and put in conflict in the search bar, you will find plenty of information about how to de-escalate it and how to talk to people who don't necessarily think the way you do, and yet you can still come to an agreement with them.
Exactly. Now, I just want to also, in terms of the podcast that we have, I'm going to plug one specifically. It is Peer One-on-Ones. Now, for those of you that are potentially thinking to yourself, you might struggle with rebuilding or building from scratch some of those connections. And you think to yourself, and you're like Wendy and I, and you're not people focused, and you think to yourself, how am I supposed to do that with my peers? How am I supposed to get us past the storming stage to the norming stage? I'd listen to the podcast on Peer One-on-Ones, because then it also allows for things like peer feedback, right? Mm-hmm. It's, I want to say having a weekly peer one-on-one is like booster cables for your relationship. You might not have needed one before. You might not have, because you were peers and you worked together for a really long time and you knew each other and it worked. But when you go back to the office, at least short term, to get you back to that place, peer one-on-ones might help with that. Now, that then doesn't add to help in terms of our next point. That is what I suggested is yet another meeting. And we should all expect that when we go back to the office, there should generally be more, or there will generally be more meetings. Meetings are used many times wrongly as a first line of defense for every problem at work. Now, that's only compounded in this case by the fact that we've been apart The obvious solution to returning to team cohesion is bringing us all back together. And, I mean, we're most of us distant right now, and it's hard to meet, or it's more difficult. I mean, there are more variables in play, and you have to set up a meeting invite, and you have to create a Zoom meeting, and you have to X, Y, and Z. But now when you're in the office, you're in person, meetings are easier. You can just yell across the room, "Hey, Wendy, do you want to just join us really quick here in the room for a quick meeting?" Now, whether meetings are necessary is irrelevant. Meetings feel to us like we're taking action. Meetings feel like there'll be a solution. And human beings behave. They act based on their feelings far more than we'd like to admit that we do. So, in the short term, just know that the number of meetings in your calendar will go up.
And don't try and fight this by pointing out the general ineffectiveness of meetings. Like that's the
Not helpful.
Like why are we doing this? This
Right.
isn't going to help. If you do have to go to a meeting, if a meeting is called that you have to go, that's part of the rules, or at least you have to go if it's a meeting that you should be at, right? You don't have to go if somebody just is inviting you to things that are completely irrelevant to your life. But if it's your team, it's the work you're working on, there's an agenda, then yes, you have to go. But if you go to a meeting, do your part to make it as effective as possible.
Right.
You can pay attention to what's happening, write down the tasks, try and clarify points, support people when they say something you agree with, try and drive to a decision, all of the things that make a meeting effective. And whether that works or not, in some cases it will, and in some cases it won't, use the meeting time as an opportunity to rebuild the relationships. It's an opportunity to communicate. You're in the room with a bunch of people. Don't spend your time thinking this could be an email, or if I was at home right now, I could turn off the video and go and do my laundry, or do email. And for goodness sake,
email.
Please don't do email in meetings.
Or say those things out loud.
No,
Don't do that.
Instead, pay attention.
Right.
And support your colleagues. So when somebody says something you agree with, say, I agree with that. Or if they do something, I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying very hard to write some technical requirements in user stories, which I only barely understand, but I tried very hard. And Alex on our team said, "Wendy, thank you for writing these as user stories. It's really helpful to me." And I was like, "Oh, that was the nicest thing anybody had said in a week." And it was an appreciation of the effort I'd put in.
Yeah.
And Alex is my peer. He had no reason to say anything, but he said it in a meeting in front of other people, and it made my week. It's amazing how small what you have to say is for people to feel like you care about them. So use meetings to find that common sense of purpose, to support, to be supportive, to help people find their way back almost. Because the sooner your team returns to norming and performing, the sooner you'll get out of meetings.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So for those of you who don't like meetings, make those meetings as effective as you can, build the relationships, and the number of meetings will go down.
Exactly. Decrease the likelihood that we need a follow-up meeting.
Yes.
That's the way to get out of it.
Indeed.
Folks, the world's starting to open back up. And so on September 7th and 8th of this year, we have an in-person Effective Manager and Effective Communicator Conference in Silicon Valley. We have 2 presenters on the road this week, in the last week of June, and we suspect things will continue to improve, although I'm sure the airline industry will find things a bit bumpy in the weeks and months ahead, adjusting to their new levels and trying to respond to everybody's desperation to get on the road. But again, September 7th and 8th in Silicon Valley, that's usually in Cupertino, our Effective Manager and Effective Communicator Conference in person. Come to the website and sign up.
Now, the next one is treat it like your first job. You guys remember, right? You remember your first job when you first started working in an office, and at 6 p.m., you were exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, not even your first job, if you can't remember that far back. I know I can't. Even think of the first few weeks of your current job. You're trying to take in and process, in this circumstance, that is us going back to the office, you're is just like a first job in that you're going back, you're trying to process so much and give the impression that you're hitting the ground running, and you end up falling asleep when it's your kid's bedtime.
I'm reading the story and I fall asleep.
Right? Or you're making dinner and you can barely get to the end of making dinner. You're like, you know what? I'm just going to eat this in bed. I'm too tired. My brain, I'm exhausted. Going back to the office is going to be exactly like that. Prepare yourself in advance for the exhaustion that you will certainly feel when you have to get up and get dressed and go to the office every day. It's going to be far more exhausting than what you've been used to over the last 12 to 18 months.
So here's some easy things to do to get prepared or to make that time easier for you. Make sure you have 5 days worth of clothes ready for the weekend, ready at the weekend before you go back to work. Like, go and get the clothes that you actually have to wear out the house, which you haven't put on for 18 months. Right. And wash them if they need washing, or press them, or discover that, oh, I didn't wash them like the day I came home and they've sat there for 18 months. You might need to go buy new clothes.
You might.
But think about it. You're going to go to work in an office. You're going to need to be there at a certain time. And you haven't had to get dressed to the same standard for the last 18 months. So make it easy on yourself. Prepare that the weekend before. Fill your car with gas, because you know that Monday morning, the day we all go back to work, there's going to be a queue at the gas station of all the people going, oh no, I needed gas to get to work.
Exactly.
Make sure you have meals planned for the week. Like, you don't have to prep them, but, you know, make sure there's food in the house at least.
Right?
Because I don't know about everybody else, but Instacart comes to my house in 2 hours. So I don't realize I've run out of food. I realize I've run out of food at 10 o'clock, but I'm going to be here at 12. So I just put in an Instacart order and it comes in 2 hours. I haven't had to plan food for as long as I've been using Instacart. So
exactly.
Plan that, especially if you have children that need feeding. You know, adults, it's okay, but
exactly.
Don't schedule extra commitments for the first few weeks. Now, if somebody says you want to go to the movies, don't do it Monday night or Tuesday night of the first week. Maybe Friday, and then you can fall asleep at the cinema like I used to, or maybe in a couple of weeks.
I would even suggest keeping those evenings free could help if your team wants to. Like on Friday at the end of the work, go for
going out for a drink.
If the team wants to do more of that connecting, I mean, you might be exhausted, but on the other hand, it might be that opportunity to build more relationships with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can expect to be extra tired and cranky.
Extra. More than I am now.
Yes, exactly. Give yourself extra time for your morning routine. However long it used to take you from getting up to getting out of the house, add 15 or 20 minutes, because you're doing this again for the first time. It's so weird. Mark is traveling in a month. He's going to Minneapolis to present and Portland. And he and I are doing travel. And it's the first time we've done travel. And we literally can barely remember how we used to do it. And I'm sure we're going to make mistakes, and we've forgotten all the tricks. And going, you know, if I had to go back to work in an office, if I had to do a morning routine, I know it would take me 3 weeks to remember how I did it.
Exactly. I'm confident that Mark's probably going to end up in Minneapolis, having forgotten something huge like socks.
Yep.
I mean, if you had a checklist for small things when you started doing your job, but you stopped using it because you got so in sync and in routine, grab out your checklists.
Yes.
Because you're going to forget things.
Yeah, absolutely. And then give yourself extra time for your commute, because you don't make the whole thing more stressful by having to beat Google Maps.
Right?
Google Maps is always right as well. It's very difficult to beat Google Maps. So if it says you're going to be 10 minutes late to work, you're going to be 10 minutes late. And so is everybody else. So just give yourself the extra 10 minutes.
Yeah, don't get caught in something I have a couple of times during this pandemic. I mean, like, oh, well, you can shave a couple of minutes off the time because there's going to be no traffic. And then you get out there and there's a ton of traffic. So just
And if you do all of that and on Tuesday it's like butter, then you can just say Wendy and Sarah were
Totally.
Overly pessimistic.
Totally. I'll buy you a coffee while you're sitting in the lobby. It's too funny. Okay. Now, that takes us then to the last point on our list today is wait a year. Going back to work on site is likely to be as disconcerting as working from home was when we started doing that. Now, we bring up this point because we don't want you to make a knee-jerk decision about the long-term viability of your current job based on the first few months of returning to office. You're in flux because of all of the things that we've previously mentioned. It's not going to be all sunshine and roses. The team's in flux. They're still figuring out how to work together. The company is in flux. They don't really know how to bring people back into the organization. The country that you live in is in flux, and there's unknowns about our current situation, combined with the fact that everything is moving at once. And despite what anyone would have us think, nobody can really predict what's going to happen. So there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of stressors that are wrapped up inside this situation, which means that making a decision about whether or not you love your job or hate it isn't something we'd recommend you make in the short term.
Things will never be the same again. That's true. On the other hand, as we said, human beings carry on having babies. We get married. All of the things that human beings do. Everything moves towards an average all of the time. We all thought that flying would be forever different after 9/11. And it was. That there are differences now than there were before. But within a year, we were flying just as much as we did beforehand, because flying is necessary and desirable, and the danger is the danger of an airplane crash or a terrorist attack is so low that most of us are willing to risk it. Mm-hmm. We deliberately probably forget that big, enormous thing happened in order that we can carry on living a life. Yeah. And so with time, everything will return to a sort of average, not exactly the same, but an average. And a year gives you enough time to see which way the wind is blowing, decide what you want to do next, and crucially, build the relationships and the skills and all of the things that you need to do that thing that you want to do next, mm-hmm. right? If you think of it as a long-term plan, if you think, okay, I'm going to spend the next 3 months, the first 3 months, I'm just going to work. I'm just going to be productive. I'm just going to get my stuff done, and I'm going to build relationships. And the next 3 months, I'm going to think about whether or not this is the right place for me, the right company, whether, the things that have changed at home or the things that have changed in the world make me want to be somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to take the next 6 months to get from where I am now to where I want to be.
Exactly.
That will be 1,000,000 times more successful than going in on the second day and thinking, I can't do this commute, and resigning on the spot.
Exactly. Slower is better. All right. So now, guys, to reiterate what Wendy said earlier, we don't normally write casts that are timely. And if we'd have written this cast as a timeless one 5 years ago, no one would have thought that it would ever be useful or applicable to their daily lives. And here we are. So going back to work in the office could be as hard as going fully remote was. It was difficult. It wasn't easy to do then, and prepare for that. Be compassionate with yourself and the people you work with, and we will get through this together.
Indeed we are. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Wendy.
That's all for this week. We'll be back next week with a new topic. Bye, everyone.